one thing, but what were the footstones?
The footstones, they were made of limestone. All of the stones from northern burial ground were locally carved limestone. They were hand carved. You could still see some of the chipping on them. They never had any writing on them, but they were shaped like European-made stones. Because in this, see, this is a footstone here. One of them was squared off like that, and one of them was rounded. But this is a headstone, but it's probably for a young person. The other one was rounded. A footstone would just be shorter. But they had the style of stones, imported stones you would find in the white cemeteries, just that they were made, locally made, and they never attempted to put any writing on them, because African people would generally have been non-literate people. Okay, yeah. Yeah, sorry, a footstone is at the foot. So a headstone is going to be at the head. And for east-west burials, because all of these burials are east-west, the headstone needs to be at the western end. The footstone is going to be at the eastern end. And because there are some in here, in this cemetery, I don't have any in these photographs, but the footstone sometimes had the initials of the person. The headstone is going to have their name, something about them, when they were born, when they died. The footstone, sometimes it would have a scripture reading, sometimes it had initials, but it's smaller and it's marking the outer limit, because all of this curbing, this would be put in much later after the burial.
Some of the slaves that came from Africa would have practiced Islam. Is there any special cemetery there for them?
He's saying that some of the slaves who came, back up. Historians now say they were not inherently slaves. They were enslaved. Some of the Africans who came in and were enslaved would have practiced Islam. And he was asking if there's any cemetery especially for them. No. I don't know if I could publicly say it, but hell no. You are already a slave, and you want what kind of cemetery?
Wouldn't they segregate them?
Well, see,
if they separated
from the records that we have, we know that there were a number of Muslim slaves, and sometimes just looking through the names, you see the names like you can see Fatima, Muhammad, and you get mentions that there are some Mohammedan slaves. But if they're on plantations, their burials are not going to be in a public cemetery. Remember, this is Nassau, this is the urban area. If they're urban, there is going to be a tendency to move them away from that. Because if you're in a very disadvantaged group, you're under heavier pressure to adapt to the ways of the dominant society. And they were already a tiny minority anyway. So they may have, you would find scattered burials. Several years ago, BEC uncovered a burial in the Montague Park area. That was an isolated burial. You would find isolated burials on individual properties. Done that. Most of these burials like that would have originally had a wooden marker. Wood doesn't usually survive archaeologically in a tropical context like this. Now, I need to mention for Northern Burial Ground, I'm working on making that into a publication. But some years, even before I started this research, I was looking through the collection of Bahamian images for a Florida museum and came across a little known, I had not seen it, a little known Winslow Homer etching, a sketch. And the title of the sketch was The Governor's Wife Walking Along a Beach, and it was dated 1895. She's walking along a beach and there are some crooked little crosses around her. I believe she was walking through northern burial ground. I want to find that image for my publication.
Just
Yeah, sorry.
oh, no, she was
Yeah,
before me.
okay. So,
Does all the cemetery, does all the graveyards have historical people in it? You don't know?
yeah, it depends on who you consider historical. That's what caused such an outcry for the cemetery that the gentleman and I were talking about, Marshall View Cemetery on Infant View Road. It's just a blank area now. People in that community were naming off not only their relatives but notable persons from the community who were buried in there. Once you have a cemetery, there are members of the community. Everyone in the community isn't going to be a no-name. Some are going to be more prominent than others. So any cemetery is going to have some people whose names would be more recognized by a wider range of people than just their relatives. But you don't only want to remember them. It's good to remember them. You also want to remember the ordinary people who made the community what it is. It helps to remember both and not just pick out the big fancy ones.
Just two quick questions I don't want to throw. The Jews,
We have
they
a
have
Jewish
a, we
cemetery.
have a Jewish graveyard. When did that come about? Because they weren't, again, like they were somewhat persona non grata in the beginning of
It's St. Matthew's, right?
Yeah, the
St.
Jewish
Matthew's.
cemetery is at
in the St.
the
Matthew's area.
western
Matthews.
edge of St. I really don't know, and I have not gone there because I'm not above jumping over walls. Because the gate is usually,
It's usually locked. And,
Yeah.
and that's why I asked it, because again, apparently it's not being used to the extent, even though it is established.
Yeah.
And there was some big discussion about non-Anglicans using some section. It was a big row within the Anglican Church, and the bishop had to come at some time, and I think,
Yeah.
settle that argument. But I don't want to. The other question is communicable diseases like yellow fever, dysentery, and or malaria and whatnot. I always got the impression, my parents to some extent influenced that when they were heavily structured,
that was a
closed
cholera
in,
grave.
like a Bethlehem.
My
That
mother
was
told
because-
us that.
and that's what they
Yeah.
told us.
Yeah, when I did this presentation before, I got a number of people telling me that. My mother used to tell us those tombs in Bethlehem, they were cholera graves.
Yeah.
We concluded that story was developed to keep fast, itchy little children away from
Or
these
like
graves.
this, yeah.
Yeah, because in the Baintown community, because my mother's family would have moved in there from Andrews in the early 1920s. So just like in the Pawn area, you had people from other family islands coming in. They see these things, they know what they are, but they don't know the full story behind it. And it seems that was a story that was developed to keep very curious little children away. It didn't, we used to keep from walking on, but like I said, we used to eat the tamarind leaves. We got this week's.
Well, the Tara was good.
Oh yeah, but we didn't know the tamarind was with the grave. But we were told they were cholera. There was never any separate cholera.
Any further questions?
They don't eat dilly and tamarind out of the graveyard. They don't know what
My
they
mother
was
does.
Or you mean the Foxhillians? You don't eat what? You don't eat them out of graveyards? Okay.
They would be very rich and nutritious because they get all the nutrients from bones.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, you have one more question, Nikki. It's the last one.
Okay, Dr. Turner.
So, but the soldiers have died by Fort
Fort Charlotte?
Yeah. So what were they, are they all such up the graveyard, see, in history, there's something that born and died.
A cemetery, no. Yeah, because there are quite a bit of records about the Fort Charlotte compound, the Fort Charlotte complex. And we did some limited excavations there before that man turned the fort white. But we know from the records they would describe it because they liked the hill for the fort because it would controlled access to the harbor. And when they put the barracks there, it looks like just the grassy area where the parking lot for the fort is now. The grassed area is where the barracks was originally. It was stone. It was taken down like in the mid 1830s. They got upset because and by the mid 1820s they made the decision that they were going to, all of the military who were here were going to be predominantly African, because Europeans were having a higher death rate than the Africans from yellow fever, and they never did understand that it was the mosquitoes from the swamp. If they protected themselves against mosquitoes, it would do. So they eventually tore down the barracks and moved from there, still not understanding what was generating the yellow fever, but they knew that Europeans would die faster, because some of these soldiers would travel with their wives and their children. There was one group would cause them to move from Fort Nassau, the 47th Regiment. They came in, they had over 300 people, and within a year, more than half of them were dead, men, women, and children. And that happened several times. And so by the 1820s, the governor didn't like it, but the military was like, we not sending no more European soldiers, you gotta kill them too fast. But there, from all of the records, because a military area, you needed to keep it clear, because they had to be concerned the enemy could potentially come from any angle. So you're not going to build around it. There was no cemetery out there. There's no record of it. They had kitchens, barracks. Where Clifford Park is, there were barracks. There was a hospital. The officer's kitchen was on the slope just above, in the experimental farm area. There wasn't going to be a cemetery. We know that the black ones, they would be baptized, because like whole regiments of them, you'd see them baptized in the Anglican church records. The white ones, like I told you, there was a whole section in Pottersfield/Besson Cemetery where they were buried. The black ones, they could be buried in some other places because they weren't as well-to-do. Their graves would not be as well marked. But as far as we know, they weren't going to be buried up there.
Well, thank you very much. We see that bones can talk. We see that bones can talk, teeth can talk, and digging up the past can certainly give us a whole history lesson. And this is one thing I tell you about Grace Turner. She did not use any paper. All of that information came spewing out of her. And that is one thing I like about her. Any topic you ask her about history or the history of the Bahamas, she can tell you some research. So Grace, again, thank you very much. We appreciate your knowledge, your understanding, your sharing, and we want you to continue. And we look forward to having a great article in our 2015 journal from this lecture. So please, let's hear it again for Dr. Grace Turner.
I have to publish it as a book first.
Okay, very good. So we'll still look forward to that. Please don't forget, we have the AGM next week, 6 o'clock right here. We have some flyers on the desk concerning that as you leave. Please take one so that you don't forget. And we look forward to seeing all of you at the luncheon and also at the next lecture, which will be the 28th, Thursday the 28th of May, right here, talking about the Loyalists. That should also be very interesting. And as I say, Vera Chase and Michelle Thurston, I'm sure they're going to do a good job. So thank you very much. Be safe going home, and we appreciate your presence here tonight. Thank you.